and welcome to Deep Dive with Jamie Stein, where we take a deep dive look at all things reality TV, pop culture, and the world at large. I'm an intuitive and an empath, which means I pick up on the thoughts, feelings, and energy percolating in other people and the world around me. I believe there is meaning waiting to be found at every turn if you're willing to see it. So join me as we dismantle everything from trash TV to high spiritual concepts and learn more about ourselves, each other, and how we're all connected. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Deep Dive with Jamie Stein. Today is going to be a solo episode. I felt compelled and impelled to touch down on Jax Taylor's recent bipolar and PTSD diagnoses. I've been getting a lot of questions about that, people wanting to know my thoughts, so I thought I would just take this opportunity to dive into it. And I have a lot of thoughts about this actually, and probably different contradicting thoughts about this. So I'm just going to use today to enumerate those thoughts in a kind of free form way, and we'll just sort of see where this wants to go and what it wants to reveal about some of the deeper themes involved. As you've probably already seen, I'm also using this as an opportunity to re-release the episode that Piper Sample and I had recorded about Jax some time ago. I think we recorded this for Instagram way back around 2020, I want to say, and then I re-released it on the pod a year or so ago. And it's interesting because the topic or the title or the headline of the episode is actually what would be required for Jax Taylor to heal. And so I think that's an interesting topic given the fact that he's now undertaking a conscious path of healing. And it's pretty interesting to go back and listen to it now. I listened to Jax's episode on his podcast, which I believe is called When Reality Hits with Jax and Brittany. And I listened to him talking to his life coach about the recent diagnosis, just to do a little bit of research for today. And it was really interesting just to see how much of what he shared actually lined up with what came through on that episode. I haven't listened to the episode in a minute, but I remember very specifically talking about how Jax would do well and thrive with established structure. I remember us talking specifically about how Jax actually doesn't feel like he's a leader in his native essence, but he's actually someone who's meant to follow, and that he's looking for a leader that is worthy of following. We talked about possible relationship to chaos in childhood. And I'm saying all this because these are literally things that he talks about very explicitly on his own podcast today. So I just always think that's kind of fun and cool, as you all know. I always hold all of this as playful exploration in the sense that we don't know these people. We're going off edited TV shows, and at the same time, also honoring and taking seriously that there is a space that gets opened up here. And it's always really cool to get confirmation that a lot of the information that's coming through actually feels on target for the people involved, and that we are creating a space that has the potential to see and hear these people on a much deeper level. So I'm going to jump into it, but having said all that, as I said, I'm going to re-release the episode, the past episode at the end of this one. And if you're interested in these topics, I really invite you to go listen to Jax's latest episode of When Reality Hits. Well, I don't know. I'm recording this on Thursday, September 12th. I think this is going to come out in a week, so probably by now he's released other episodes. But whatever that episode is with his life coach, I think the life coach's name is Scott or something like that. And you can go compare and contrast what came through. All right. So yeah, let's dive in. So like I said, so many thoughts, so many threads, so many things being true at once. So if I just kind of slow all this down and just take it one step at a time, I want to say first and foremost, my initial reaction to seeing Jax's bipolar diagnosis was a positive one. Like it actually it really touched me. It really moved me. I found it really heartening that Jax did actually go to get help, that he actually went to rehab, that he actually stayed for the full stint of rehab, and that he received an actual mental health diagnosis. Now, I have a lot to say about this. Before I get into different thoughts about it, one of the things that feels really important to say up top, just because I've noticed a little bit of confusion when I've been poking around to online reaction to the current news. And let me just preface this by saying I am in no way an expert on anything like bipolar disorder, but I have rudimentary knowledge, and I have enough knowledge to say, and to be clear, and it feels really important to say this out loud for the benefit of anyone who might not be clear about this. Jax's bipolar diagnosis is 100% not an explanation for all of Jax's behavior on the show. And in fact, we could say it's not even an explanation for most of his behavior that we've seen on the show. Bipolar disorder, as it's called, and I gotta just say this as a caveat, I hate the word disorder. I hate using the word disorder. It feels so judgmental to me. It feels so pathologizing to me. I know this is the language that's used, so I'm going to use it, but I hate referring to this as a disorder. I think language is so powerful. I think the words we use carry so much power, so much energy, and to refer to this as a disorder, it just immediately casts it in a certain type of framework that I have to imagine is not beneficial for someone who's dealing with this. If I were someone struggling with bipolar disorder, I certainly would not want to call it a disorder. Personally, why can't we just call it a bipolar pattern? Because that's what we're talking about here. It's a mood pattern. And, perhaps we'll get more into this over the course of the episode. But for me, in the way that I approach the psychospiritual journey, I think there's wisdom and certainly meaning in everything, all our patterns of behavior. And that when we really kind of distill different patterns of behavior down to where they're really coming from inside of us, there's always voices that want to be heard there. And I don't know, I just always think there's a method to the madness. No matter how outwardly destructive or debilitating that madness may seem on the outside to us and to others, I've found that when we really create space, a non-judgmental, non-shaming space to just be curious about the patterns and the energy that lives in the patterns and what that energy might wants to reveal to us about ourselves and our history and what's longing to be expressed through us, there's just always wisdom there. So in my mind, it's bipolar pattern, not bipolar disorder. In the world, it's called bipolar disorder. But this is all just to say that Jax's bipolar diagnosis is not an explanation for a lot of the behavior that we've seen on the show. It does not account for lying, for example. It does not account for infidelity, for example. It does not account for compulsive cheating, for example. It does not account for patterns of manipulation, for example. And so I'm just saying this because I've seen a little bit of maybe good intentioned people thinking this kind of like explains all of Jax. It doesn't explain all of Jax. And, I think, again, I'm not an expert, so I don't even really want to sort of put myself in the position of explaining bipolar disorder, but it's a mood pattern. It's characterized by typically bouts of what they call mania, like, extremely exaggerated manic mood swings, and then usually followed by periods of depressive mood swings. So there's like high highs and then there's low lows. So, I think what this can explain is, there have certainly been times when we've seen Jax in what we might call more manic episodes. So, what immediately springs to mind is end of season 8, his last season. If you remember, he had just gotten married, a time where he should be sort of settling into a calmer, more stable lifestyle. And we all saw he got really kind of aggro, really restless. He was going to the gym 3 times a day. very short in charge with Brittany, really sort of unable to contain, a really sort of like strongly charged energy that was coming through him. Now, in the case of Jax, that tends to get funneled through rage and aggression. And even that, I want to say, I mean, look, in some ways, yes, we could say the bipolar disorder relates to that in a sense that it seems like with Jax, it becomes a vehicle for all that unexpressed rage and aggression. It just feels important to note, though, that that's still Jax's particular bag of chips. And bipolar disorder does not necessarily equate with things like rage or aggression. So, it's a fine distinction. Jax's bouts of mania may then feed and fuel his particular relationship to things like compulsivity, to things like rage, to things like maybe even compulsively lying, if, that's where his sort of energy wants to go. But again, it just feels really important to note that those particular characteristics, those are specific to Jax. And they would most likely be living in him anyway, even without the bipolar disorder diagnosis. And yeah, it just feels important to say that, both just for the sake of clarity, but also because, I have to imagine there are people listening to this, and there are certainly people out there in the world who identify as bipolar or have people in their lives who are diagnosed with bipolar. And, it just feels a little murky and almost irresponsible and unfair to people to like be holding Jax up as a possible poster boy for bipolar disorder and furthering an implicit message that, his whole host of what we might call his isms are explained by bipolar disorder when that's not in fact the case. So, having said that, let me continue. Yeah, my first impulse in hearing this, it really touched me. It really moved me. I feel like I really feel something happening here in terms of the larger picture of reality TV in general. So I guess I'm going to kind of go on my first little digression here. I know I've barely talked about Jax, but I'm going to go on my first little digression here, which is I do sense, feel, and hear something shifting in the landscape of reality TV in a number of ways. And in a way, this kind of brings me back to a question that I started to consciously bring into the podcast at the beginning of the year when we got the season finale to last season's Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, and it was revealed that Monica was in fact reality Von Tease and that she had infiltrated this group, and there was that whole kerfuffle. And I remember watching that finale and really being struck by the fact that we have now entered this meta phase of reality TV where we are literally watching reality TV about people being on TV and arguing about the politics of being on TV. Now, of course, the television aspect has always been present. I mean, it's always been sort of a silent aspect of the entire industry. How can it not be? But it really has been like barreling through the forefront in the last year or so. The fourth wall has completely tumbled down. And like I said, in the case of Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, we're literally watching these cast members fight about being on TV, social media related to TV, the desire to be on TV. It is literally TV about being on TV. And I remember really sitting with this question and bringing this question into the podcast of, what is this reflecting in the collective? This podcast really operates from the premise that everything is a mirror reflection of everything else, and everything that exists in the collective is in some way a reflection of what's going on a deeper level of the collective, which includes something like reality TV. So when I was watching The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City and watching this reality Von Tease drama play out, and then, also taking into account like Vanderpump Rules and like this whole last season, which again, this was another season of a TV show about the politics of being on a TV show. I mean, it was literally about what makes good reality TV, and the way that Ariana was orienting towards that, the way that Lala was orienting towards that, the way that Tom Sandoval was orienting towards that. Even watching what just went down this season on Real Housewives of New Jersey, it's once again another season of reality TV that is about the politics of being on TV. And like I said, for me, as someone who's just so curious about the deeper meaning and symbolism of everything, I was just really sitting with this question of like, what is this reflecting in the world right now? And it's interesting because I've been sitting with that question all year. And I finally found myself having at least one possible answer. Again, you guys, I never come from the point of view that there's only one answer. There's so many possible answers depending on your perspective, who you are, your life experience, where you're living in the world. That's what sort of makes this thing called humanity such an interesting, multifaceted experience. Is there's just so many different threads and so many different facets and dimensions to what we call the truth, or what we call quote unquote reality, right? But one possible thread that came through me, I was in Whole Foods recently, and it's significant because I don't like going to Whole Foods at this point for a very particular reason, and it's a particular reason that's connected to this thread, which is at this point, to me, Whole Foods, in terms of symbolism, it kind of really represents the kind of almost what I would call like cannibalistic strain that we're finding ourselves in. Like Whole Foods at one point, as we all know, it was sort of a brand that stood for something, right? And it was a brand that it really stood in some ways for like the little guy. It stood much more for small business. It stood as something that was kind of in opposition to the big conglomerate supermarkets, right? You went to Whole Foods to go get like your organic food, to go get the food that was like more locally raised. You went to Whole Foods for a company that at one point stood for consciousness, connected to our food and our groceries, right? And I think, as we all know, those days are long gone. Whole Foods, I mean, it's literally like, this could be like a movie parody. It was acquired by fucking Amazon. It was acquired by Jeff Bezos. And, now it's sort of like got the pretense of its original brand, but it bears no actual resemblance to that brand. Again, it's not really the same thing, right? Because it's just another facet of the big business. And to my point, there's been a lot of complaints and discussion about how Whole Foods has gone to hell in a handbasket over the years. I mean, literally the one that's local to me, it's like half the time it's understaffed, half the time it's out of everything. And I've actually poked around on the local online forums, and people are literally talking about, since this has been taken over by Amazon, the entire sort of corporate culture has gone to hell. It's understaffed, it's overworked, it's underpaid, it's understocked. And so that's why I don't even like going to Whole Foods anymore. It just makes me feel a little bit dirty when I'm in there. I feel like I'm contributing to something that's not sort of, it just feels a little deceptive. I'd rather just go to like a big chain supermarket and just give them my money, because at least they're transparent. But anyways, here in New Mexico, there aren't a lot of options all the time. So I was in Whole Foods, and I was like digging out my phone to get my Amazon Prime account number, which, I have Amazon Prime. Again, I'm in New Mexico. Access to fast delivery is important to me. So I'm like totally playing into the system. I'm a part of it. And like I'm digging out my iPhone to get my Amazon Prime app out, to get my Amazon Prime membership so I can get my little fucking discount of like whatever, $3 off my grocery bill. And it just like hit me, just this notion of like, we're living in a time right now where it just feels like the world truly is cannibalizing itself. Like, I just have such a distinct sense that the structures that are in place, it's like, it's no longer sustainable. I think a lot of us feel it. It's like the world is kind of going to hell in a handbasket because the system that we've set up it literally just does not feel sustainable anymore. And we're sort of seeing that play out in so many different ways, right? Where it's like even, I mentioned I'm in New Mexico. There's just like an economic disparity here. There's like a housing crisis here where the people who have lived here for generations can no longer afford to live here. And then people like me are coming in who can afford to live here. It's the same exact pattern that I was talking about with Whole Foods, where especially in this sort of ever-changing world where so much of it is becoming overdeveloped and houses and neighborhoods are all looking the same and feel like they're coming from the same sort of cookie cutter handbook, is, people start flocking to places like Santa Fe saying, well, I want to be there and I want to live there. And then what happens is it's drawing in people who have money and means to drive the real estate up and the market value of homes and apartments up. And then suddenly the very locals who have lived here for generations and who in large part have made this place what it is get driven out. And so just like with Whole Foods, suddenly we're in a situation where the very spirit that made this place special in the first place is getting stomped out by virtue of people coming in and driving the real estate up. And it's not just New Mexico. This is happening everywhere. I mean, this was happening in Los Angeles. The very same thing was happening in Los Angeles when I left. When I first moved to Los Angeles, Venice Beach, California, it was so different than what it is today. It was actually considered dangerous. A lot of people didn't really even want to go there. It was definitely bohemian. It was an artistic, creative community. It was not an expensive place to live. It had so much just sort of colorful character. And then, the same thing happens is it has this reputation for being this spirited bohemian place. Suddenly it becomes cool to live there. And suddenly, all the people move in, right? With their money and their ability to afford places. And suddenly they want different things from the community. They want their high-end boutique stores and they want their, $10 donuts and, whatnot. And suddenly the neighborhood and the landscape of the neighborhood completely changes. And it ultimately drives out the very people who made it what it was in the first place. And you sort of see this everywhere. There's like a housing crisis in so many places. You're seeing it in terms of politics, certainly, the division between our two-party system. You're seeing it certainly just even in terms of like the climate, and everything that's happening with climate change. It just feels like everything's reaching a breaking point where the system that we've created to keep the engine going and moving is literally cannibalizing itself. And there's a strain, like everything is breaking down. Everything feels like it's going to hell in a handbasket. And the systems that we have created can no longer sustain themselves at the rate they're going. And once I really sort of took that in for myself on a conscious level, it just suddenly hit me. It's like, oh, this is what's happening in reality TV. This is the same thing that's happening in reality TV. Reality TV once stood for something, right? It once represented something very specific, which is in its name, reality TV. It was television programming that was based on reality, that cast real people and followed them around, documenting their real experiences that unfolded on camera. And we watched it for that sense of authenticity. We watched it for that sense of reality. We loved connecting with real human beings who were having real human experiences that in some way reflected our own real human experience. And as we know, this started way back when with The Real World, and it's grown and evolved over the years, but it's become a huge enterprise precisely because it's clearly sort of tapping in, at the very least, to some sort of innate need for deeper connection and reflection in the collective. But then what's happened to reality TV? Well, it's very much the same thing we're seeing happen in commerce. It's very much the same thing we're seeing happen in real estate, where suddenly the system that we've created to house and hold reality TV can no longer hold, support, or sustain what it's become. We're now living in a world where reality TV stardom has in fact become a form of stardom. And so these people who are cast on these shows to document their real lives have now become centered on reality TV itself. Their real lives are now about being reality TV celebrities who are making careers out of being on reality TV, such that when we're now watching reality TV, we're not necessarily watching real people in real lives dealing with real issues that we can relate to anymore. We're now watching people who are navigating what it means to be a reality TV star on a reality show, earning a living as a reality TV celebrity. So much like Whole Foods can no longer be this, more independent-minded organic grocery store with integrity, much like places like Santa Fe and Venice can no longer have that sort of local charm that once made them so magical in the first place, we're now in an era where reality TV is no longer the thing that reality TV used to be, and it is instead, again, it's cannibalizing itself. It's eating its own tail. It's becoming something that very much is almost like the antithesis of what made it special in the first place. Reality TV is no longer about the quote unquote reality it was originally intended to depict. The reality of the people in reality TV has become about reality TV. Like there's this breakdown happening. And I don't think it's a coincidence that globally, in terms of all these systems, we're watching the systems break down. We're watching the systems cannibalize themselves. And again, it's the same thing with reality TV. We're watching the system break down in front of our very eyes. I mean, we're literally seeing that with the Real Housewives of New Jersey, where there's this whole question mark about whether it's even coming back because the show could no longer sustain itself. Vanderpump Rules had to literally take a pause for them to figure out what they're doing because the show could no longer sustain itself. So I feel like there is this sort of energetic correlation of what's sort of going on in the world in real reality, we could say, and then what's sort of going on in this representation of real reality, reality TV. And it is this notion of systems that can no longer sustain themselves, systems that are breaking down, systems that have reached their saturation point. Now, why am I saying all this? What is the point of this digression? What's so interesting to me in terms of coming back to the real world is that at the same time systems are breaking down, what a lot of people are noticing, myself included, is that there is also at the same time this kind of emerging invitation into deepening consciousness. It feels like at the same time that the world is going to hell in a handbasket, it just feels like there's so much new information that's emerging that's so thrilling and exciting. I mean, even if you just want to look at like things like, the Me Too movement, if you want to look at things like Black Lives Matters, if you want to look at, there's the destructive aspect of social media, which is like feeding and fueling the division amongst us and feeding and fueling the breakdown of reality TV. But there's also this whole other aspect of social media, which is it gives us representation. It's like this vehicle for information spreading like wildfire. It's breaking open, places where there were like veils of silence or even censorship. And it's providing a context and a framework for much deeper conversations to emerge and for the collective to finally start developing like a new capacity for deeper thinking, for nuance, for multiple things being true at once. And so it's so interesting to me, and it makes so much sense that as the old way is reaching the saturation point and as the old way is breaking down, from that or alongside that, perhaps energetically connected to that, there is also emerging consciousness. And we don't know exactly how this is going to go or how it's going to play out, but both threads very much feel here. And so the reason why I'm saying all this to bring this back to Jax Taylor, not just Jax, but some others as well, is that I just feel like the same thing going on with reality TV, where on one hand, reality TV, it's breaking down and it's becoming a caricature of itself and it's becoming way too meta for its own good. But then at the same time, here is this, for my mind, this speck of new life and energy where you've got this guy, Jax Taylor, and it's almost like perfect that it's Jax, because Jax in a way really sort of typifies and represents, what we could call the absolute absurdity of reality TV, or like the worst of reality TV, in the sense that this is a guy who's been rewarded for years for bad behavior. You know, it made him a star, and he kind of willingly played the role of this villain and this buffoon, and we all have participated. And I mean, how many times have we all said it, myself included? Jax Taylor makes great TV because he just sort of throws it all out there. He has no shame. He's just kind of like living his authentic self, which many times is his authentic, horrible self. And it just creates this sort of larger than life spectacle on reality TV. And we've always accepted him as such. You know, I mean, it's funny. I keep coming back to that kind of, you know, what's now an iconic moment for him where he almost drowned. And he was saying, you know, you can come help me if you want. I've got a lot of stuff to say about that moment. Maybe I'll circle back around to that. But, you know, it's just so interesting. It's like, to this day, it's sort of played for laughs. You know what I mean? It's like this guy struggling out in the water, literally asking for help, requesting for help, and so kind of like bashful about it that he's timid in his request, even though he's like possibly dying. I mean, this couldn't be more metaphorical if you were sort of writing it as a script. And we kind of all pointed our finger at it and made a joke out of it. You know, and Jax Taylor, in a way, has been a joke. And he's been the subject of our derision. He's been the subject of our judgment. And again, he's been the subject of our entertainment. Again, he sort of represents this heyday of reality TV that we've had for the last 10 or so years. And so I think the reason why I'm saying all this, for me, the reason why I say my initial response is to be so heartened by this diagnosis and him being really transparent in this diagnosis, is it's like, I just feel so much humanity here. It's like, this is part of what was going on underneath the three-ring circus that we were participating in with this guy. This is what was going on underneath the cartoon TV villain. This is what was going on, or part of what was going on underneath the buffoonery. There were real mental health issues. There was real trauma. You know, it seems likely that there's real addiction issues. And I just, even as I'm saying it, like, I just feel really touched in my heart. I feel like a real possible reclamation here. It's like, it feels like there's something human that's being reclaimed from the reality TV archetype. And, you know, it's obviously not just Jax. We've seen, for example, Lala claim her sobriety. We've seen Carl Radke claim his sobriety. Rachel Leviss is out there sort of doing her inner work connected to the controversies, the sensationalist controversy she found herself in as a result of Vanderpump Rules. And it's like, again, it's, to me, something's just sort of energetically clicking into place. It's like, as we're watching reality TV break down, it feels like there's this other thread emerging where the much more complex nature of these people's actual humanity. Sheena is another example. I mean, she talked about her OCD. I don't know if she was actually officially diagnosed. It seemed like she was officially diagnosed, but she talked about her obsessive compulsive disorder last season. There's a real humanity that's emerging that, to me, feels sort of energetically similar to this sort of larger pattern or thread of consciousness that also seems to be evolving and emerging in the larger world. You know, and in a way, it makes sense to me, right? It makes sense to me that essentially what we're talking about is one matrix breaking down, one matrix cannibalizing itself. And it makes sense to me then that alongside that, or intertwined with that, is this notion of escaping the matrix, a new matrix being born, the opportunity to create a new matrix that better serves where we're heading and what we're evolving into. And again, I feel like we've literally seen this play out in some ways on these actual reality shows. I mean, I'm speaking here very much about the finale of Vanderpump Rules last season, where, again, this sort of self-cannibalizing tension came to a head where we're once again literally watching a finale where the reality TV characters in the show are having literal debates about what constitutes reality TV and what makes good reality TV. Again, this could not be more meta. This is the cannibalistic breakdown of the matrix of reality TV. And to me, it's not a coincidence that in this very same episode where this kind of meta, self-referential, self-cannibalization is coming to a head, it's also the same episode where we're seeing someone like Ariana and Katie by her side essentially leave the matrix. Right? She essentially says F you to the pre-existing matrix. She's saying, I'm spotting how this doesn't work anymore. I'm calling out the rules of the matrix. I'm calling out how reality TV has become something so different from what it's originally intended. I'm calling out the fact that everyone here is more concerned with making a quote unquote satisfying TV show than actually reflecting the true reality of the people on the show. And I'm out. And we watched her literally take a stand and leave the parameters of this given reality TV show, leave behind her fellow castmates who wanted to make a certain type of show, leave behind the producers who wanted to make a certain show, and say, this is actually my reality. I am reclaiming my reality. I am rejecting one matrix and I am headed into another matrix. And so again, for me, this totally just reflects what I am saying, sensing, and perceiving out in the greater world, which is our current matrices, our current systems within this current matrix are fucking breaking down. And yet at the same time, in the midst of that breakdown, it feels like there's this opportunity for a new matrix to emerge. And it feels like with both the real world, quote unquote, that we're in, and also reality TV, we're in this great unknown where we don't know where the fuck this is going. All we know is on some level, it feels like the world's going to hell in a handbasket. On another level, it feels like there's a new consciousness emerging. We don't really know how this is all going to play out. We don't know what's going to win out. We don't know if this is going to be a win, lose, or draw for humanity. But here we are in the great unknown. And I think that is part of what's exciting about this moment in time is that it truly does feel like an impasse where something is coming to a head. The old way of living, the old consciousness simply isn't working anymore. There's an invitation into a new consciousness, and who the F knows where it's all gonna go from here. So yeah, my first hit on all of this was that I found it to be incredibly touching. I found it to be incredibly moving, and I think it's very real. You know, again, going to rehab for a full 30-day stint is a very real thing to do. Receiving a bipolar diagnosis is a very real first step to take. That's a real thing. This isn't Tom Sandoval doing breath work from the comfort of his living room or doing an ice bath or going on, you know, whatever that show is, Special Forces, to like prove something to the world. Like these are sort of real, actual steps towards receiving therapeutic help and addressing fundamental mental health issues that seem like they need to be addressed if Jax is to really undertake a larger process and journey into healing. So I just kind of want to say that up top, that I'm heartened by it. It moves me. It touches me. I'm proud of him for doing it, and I'm rooting for him. Now, having said that, you know, it feels like there definitely are some caveats to bring here, for sure. This is the thing, you guys. When I saw Jax's first Instagram post where he revealed the diagnosis, I felt heartened. You know, and then I read the caption, and the caption said something about, you know, I feel so at peace, you know, which is nice. And, you know, I hope that's true for him. But I did start to suddenly feel a little bit of concern for Jax that I think I tend to feel for everyone who's at the beginning of a journey like this, which is knowing, and especially for a guy like Jax, and I'm going to get into this a little bit more in the coming moments, I know that there can be a real temptation to kind of want to like fast forward to the end of things. It's like, oh, I got this diagnosis. I went to rehab. I'm turning a corner. Everything's different now. You know, like I'm going to prove myself now. Everything's changed now. And it's not just something that comes from within. It comes from without. I've talked about this on the podcast before. I've been talking about this since last year. Like I saw this with Carl Radke where, you know, the moment he got sober and then was advocating for mental health, I could just sort of feel this demand both in him, but then also from the people watching him and rooting for him and supporting him, that Carl was suddenly going to be changed overnight. That because he's now sober, he's just going to be this 100% like different person who's like got his shit together, and we're going to love everything that he has to do or to say. You kind of feel it also, for example, you see a lot of things online, or I do, towards Lala, right? When she behaves in ways that are still kind of unconscious or have major blind spots, or she's, puffing up her chest or being a hypocrite, you'll invariably see people who say things like, well, she must not really be working her 12-step program, because if she were X, Y, and Z. And it's like, oh my God, you guys, it's just like this image that we hold and this pressure that we put on ourselves and on others to immediately be changed, as opposed to sort of looking at life as this lifelong journey that unfolds over time. I mean, take it from someone who has been working on himself tirelessly for well over 20 years now. It is an evolving, usually very gradual process that is very nonlinear. I have more to say about that. I'm going to get into all of it in a moment. But I think I just sort of want to say as a headline, this is just the beginning for Jax. This is just the beginning. If he really chooses to undertake this process, right? Which we still don't know. We don't know how far Jax is going to go with this, right? It's, like I said, it's a first step. Now, is it an important step? Yes. Is it a powerful step? Yes. Is it a real step? Yes. And it is just a first step, especially for a guy like him. He's in his mid-40s, so that's 4+ decades of defenses that he's developed. It's 4+ decades of feelings and emotions that he has shoved down. It's 4+ decades of relying on his finely honed tools and tricks for what he thinks is safety and survival that does not get unraveled overnight. Jax is tending to the big fires right now. Bipolar disorder diagnosis is a big fire. A PTSD diagnosis is a big fire. He's also navigating his divorce from Brittany. These are very big fires, right? But the reality of the situation is, as I mentioned up top, there's a lot of threads and a lot of layers of defensive armoring in Jax that he's still going to have to tend to down the road. So yes, Jax at some point is going to have to deal with the part of him that, has trouble staying faithful. He is going to have to deal with the part of him that likes to compulsively lie. He is going to have to deal with his, desperate need for attention. These are all things he's going to have to deal with. Now, again, for me, these are some of the littler fires that I'm sure will start to come up in context of dealing with the bigger fires. But Jax is just in a place of dealing with these bigger fires right now. And only once those bigger fires have gotten quieter, then can he really start to go on a deeper level into these smaller fires. So do I expect that Jax Taylor is going to show up like next season on The Valley, completely changed and transformed? No, I don't. And I actually expect that he's going to be very much the same, because there is kind of like an unfolding that does happen over time. And this feels like really important to speak to. I it's funny, I've spoken a lot about Rachel Leviss on the podcast, and, I've had some people like contact me or sort of comment to me about, just kind of like my vote of support for her and what she's doing. And people bring things up that, they find questionable. So for example, it's like, how can you support her when there's this thing like this lawsuit happening, right? Like where she's sort of named Ariana in the lawsuit, which I want to be clear, like, I don't really understand the specifics of the lawsuit. And I also want to be clear, when it comes to legal matters, I always sort of back off those, because I always feel like there's due process and there's legal process, and I never know what's coming from the client, what's coming from the lawyers. I mean, even recently, like when Tom Sandoval named Ariana in some way in the lawsuit, and everyone was like flipping out about it. And I was just sort of sitting there like, well, do we know that this came from Tom, or did this come from his lawyers? And if it came from his lawyers, is it because like he's actually going after her, or is this just sort of some sort of like legal protection formality? It reminds me of like Erica Jane too. It's like people were in such an uproar that she wasn't just selling the earrings and giving the money to the victims. And I'm just sort of sitting there like, well, wait, she's embroiled in a legal issue. Like, she's got lawyers, she's got counsel, there's due process. Like, things have to get clarified and settled legally before she can really do anything. She can't just like pawn these earrings off at a pawn shop and Venmo the victims. It's like there's stuff that needs to be tended to when it comes to legal process. So I just want to say, like, I don't really understand what's going on with the lawsuit. I don't know where or whom it's coming from or what it all means. But having said that, let's just go with it for a minute. Let's just go for hypothetical example that Rachel did expressly go after Ariana in this lawsuit, and that it's all coming from her, and it's an example of her once again victimizing Ariana. And let's just go with that. Let's just run with that idea that, yeah, Rachel is doing something destructive, right? So here's the thing, you guys. What I want to say in terms of someone who's holding space for someone like Rachel from afar, and I'm going to explain what I mean by this in a moment, but let me just say this first. I don't fucking care. And again, I want to explain what I mean by this. So look, do I care in the sense that, assuming Rachel is doing something destructive to Ariana, do I care in the sense of having compassion for the Ariana, the impact that this is having on her, and just sort of this nightmare that she's been having to go through since last year? Of course. And if it is true that Rachel does have a blind spot towards Ariana and is sort of acting out against her in some sort of unconscious way, do I hope for Rachel's sake and well-being that that's something she can ultimately get consciousness around and take responsibility for and really claim and own for herself and make amends if necessary? Yes, absolutely. So I want to be clear. I don't not care in the sense of something destructive happening towards someone. But in terms of Rachel's, to use Whitney Rose's term, in terms of Rachel's healing journey, to me, it is not one thing or the other. So how is it, or why is it that I feel support for her and what she's doing, even if she's possibly still got huge blind spots? By the way, it's not even an example of even if she has blind spots. She does still have blind spots. We all do. And I'm going to get to that in a moment. But even if she still has these blind spots, even if she's still acting out, why do I, Jamie, still feel supportive of like her healing journey thus far? Because there are things that she has done that, to my mind, are real, again, my perspective, inarguably powerful choices for her healing that, regardless of what else she's doing, cannot be taken away from her. So what do I mean by this? So for example, just her checking into the Meadows in the first place and seeking in treatment, therapy and help and healing. I don't know if it's technically like a rehab program, but what I do know is that it's a very reputable program. This is not one of those essentially fraudulent places that's essentially just sort of being at a spa for a month. It's very reputable. She sought out treatment, which just that right there, she did not have to do that. She did not have to seek out mental health treatment. Tom Sandoval didn't do that. You know what I mean? So many of these people never do that. She went and she did it, right? Not only did she do that, she then decided to extend her stay there. Now, you guys, if you're not like familiar with this world, you got to understand that's like actually a huge deal. Typically, people, especially like with like addict personalities, when you have like an addict brain, you don't want to sit still too long. You don't want to be sitting around a rehab treatment facility center where you have to like be with yourself, where you have to confront yourself, what you want to do. It's kind of like what I'm talking about potentially with like Jax or whomever. You want to fix it. You want to get back out there. You want to put all the pieces back into place. You want to get back to life as normal. Anywhere but here, anywhere but here, anywhere but here. I mean, you saw that on Salt Lake City. Whitney Rose's father in the first season, he was bugging to get out of his sober living facility. That was like a whole sort of conflict on the show, was that he had just checked in, and I think it was that he was going to have a roommate, and he wanted to use that as an excuse to bounce out. And Whitney and Justin had to go and have a talk with him of like, we really think you should stay. This is the type of thing that occurs all the time. I don't want to say typically, but it's quite common and frequent that people who are checked into rehab facilities, they want to leave as soon as possible. They want to cut and run. So the fact that Rachel not only checked herself in, stayed the full time, but then actually extended it is a huge deal. And by the way, Jax even talked about this on his most recent podcast. He said he got there, he did not want to stay there. He said he just wanted to leave as quickly as possible, that his ego was like begging him to go. And it took like such a force of will in him to actually stay. So Rachel checked in, she did her full time, she extended her time. You know, she hasn't come out and said this, but I gather from the language that she uses on the show, it seems like she's in 12-step recovery for love and sex addiction. That's a huge thing. That's basically getting sober in an addiction. That is a huge thing. We also know that she was the one to cut things off with Tom. Tom was like ready to go and to proceed with that relationship. She identified him in 12-step language as her love sex addict qualifier. She went no contact with him. That was a huge decision on her part, especially when, you know, at that time, per her description, he was kind of her lifeline and he was her one ally and he was her one friend, and she cut him off. And then she's also talked about, I don't know if she's in 12-step recovery for this, but she's also talked about giving up drinking and alcohol. So again, whether that's a 12-step recovery choice or just her going sober, that's still removing a really huge crutch from her life. And then on top of all of this, she made the choice not to go back to the show. You know, I believe she had like a dollar amount that she really wanted if she was going to go back. They weren't willing to meet her demands, and she said no, and she walked away. Now, I've talked about this on the podcast before, but that is a huge decision for someone to make. It's a huge decision. I mean, you know, for us, it might not seem like a big deal, but when you're in that reality TV machine, and that's what you're known for, and that's how you're earning a living, to walk away from the immediate quick hit fix of the fame, to walk away from the immediate quick hit fix of the money, not knowing if you're ever going to get an opportunity like that again, it is a huge deal. So I just see all of these choices that she's made. And just like with Jax going to rehab and getting this diagnosis, from my perspective, nothing can take those choices away from her. Now, having said that, she is still at the start of a lifelong journey. And just because she makes all these choices now, or Carl Radke gets sober, or Lala gets sober, it doesn't then mean that they are now these perfect human beings who get it all right. And in point of fact, what often happens in our journeys is that we do take, whatever the expression is, one step forward and two steps back. Oftentimes in our journeys, the very things that fuel us towards healing are also the things that hold us back, in the sense that our unconscious blind spots can have very sneaky, tricky ways of co-opting our own healing journeys for our own vices, for lack of a better word. So let's just go again with Rachel, for example, right? You know, there's a lot of debate about whether the podcast is actually a good thing for her. So she presents it as, look, I am someone who historically I've been afraid to use my voice. I've been afraid to speak up for myself. I've been afraid to advocate for myself. I'm the type of person who normally would just kind of like shut up and disappear. I'm not doing that. No, I'm not going back to the show, but I'm also not being quiet. I am seizing the voice that I have always shut down. That's what I hear Rachel saying. What I hear Rachel saying is, it was me feeding into my own disempowerment that in some ways led me to making these even more disempowered choices of like having an affair with Tom, which then blew up in my face. I'm not doing that anymore. I am not going to disempower myself. I am not going to be quiet. I'm not going to be silent. I am going to speak up, and this podcast is a vehicle for my voice. Now, there are people out there who disagree with that viewpoint and are sort of saying, look, you're still looking for some sort of external validation. You're still defining yourself in terms of the show. You're still out there sort of looking for attention. You won't let this go, right? So there's sort of like two viewpoints as to whether the podcast is good for her or not good for her. And for me, I kind of look at it and it's like, it could very well be both. It could very well be both. At the same time, I feel like this happens all the time. It happened in my own journey. So just to use myself as an example, and I'm just sort of saying this because I'm hoping that people can sort of relate to what I'm saying as I'm saying it, and that it might create more grace, patience, and compassion within yourself for yourself and your own process in your own healing journey. But like for me, like I said, I have been a warrior in my own life when it's come to working on myself. I first went to counseling in college in my early 20s, and I'm laughing because I remember I think I started in my senior year, and I was so young and naive. I remember saying to myself, I wanted to be happy by the time I graduated college. That was my so there it was, right? There was my little short-term quick fix mindset. I was naive enough to believe that I could get a little bit of college counseling and that I'd be fully happy by the time I graduated. That was not the case. It initiated what has become a lifelong journey of working on myself, and just to kind of like contextualize this for you guys, like I really have been a warrior. I've worked tirelessly on myself since my early 20s. Nothing ever held me back when I was, a young adult and broke and didn't really have much financial resource to invest in this kind of thing. I mean, I remember I was in LA. I found this nonprofit sliding scale therapy center I think it was called the Southern California Counseling Center, where you could go for super cheap. And then when I realized I needed and wanted a deeper level of help, and by the way, I'm not advocating this per se. I'm not saying this is the right thing to do, but it just is a testament to how driven I was in this regard in my early to mid 20s. I took out a credit card with like a $10,000 limit. And I just remember saying to myself, like, I'm willing to go $10,000 in debt to get honest to God good help. And that's how I started paying for my first real therapist who, by the grace of God, had a psychospiritual perspective and did all this powerful group work that I got into. And that really is what sort of initiated my journey. So this is all just to say I have had a force of will in me to live and to heal from a young age, and nothing has ever stopped me. Now, why am I saying all of this? I'm saying all of this because even for me, that drive, which has been a net positive in my life. It's what allowed me to become a functional human being. It's what has allowed me to be a guy who's like podcasting right now and risking this visibility and putting himself out there. It's what's empowered me to have whatever quote unquote wisdom I have to share. It's what's informed so much of who I am today, right? But what I can also tell you is so much of that drive came from a fundamental belief in me that there was something fundamentally wrong with me. Like I really believed that. I thought, I mean, it's hard to talk about because it's like I have so much compassion for my younger self. But truly, just to be fully transparent, in my younger days, I literally felt worthless. Like I thought I was a worthless piece of shit, and it wasn't even like I didn't hold that as a belief. It was a fact for me, in the same way that the sky is blue, the earth is round, and we're orbiting around the sun. I fully believed it was a fact of life that I was a worthless piece of shit. And I really did. I felt fundamentally worthless. And so for me, so much of my drive to work on myself stemmed from that core sense of worthlessness. I wanted to fix myself. I wanted to be different. I wanted to be whole. In a way, I wanted to be anyone but me. And so, kind of like what I was saying up top, like there was wisdom in that, in the sense that it is true that in my state of perceived worthlessness, I wasn't whole. You know what I mean? I wasn't whole. There was something broken in me. I had no relationship to self-worth and self-love. And so on that level, it was great that I was out there doing this work on myself. And I also want to say, like, it was such a gift and a blessing because I also had so much terror and fear. You guys, I cannot, like, Oh my God, I cannot stress to you how terrified I was as a young adult. I was like the type of person, if, let's say I ordered a meal and the waiter got the meal wrong and literally brought me the wrong meal, I wouldn't even say anything because I was so scared that if I said something, there was this image in my mind that the waiter would scream and yell at me and rage at me and that I would deserve it. Like that's like, I was, a little bit of a, a little bit of a basket case. So you can imagine for someone like me to do this kind of deep confronting work on myself, it was terrifying. But primarily, or one of the chief driving factors of me mustering the courage and the conviction to do this scary work on myself was my deep level of self-loathing. So there was a gift in it. There was a wisdom in it. It propelled me forward, right? But at the same time, this is where things get sneaky, complex, and nuanced. The more that I kept working on myself, the more it reinforced this voice in me that's like, there's more I got to do. There's more I got to do. There's more I got to do. Because again, I was coming from this core belief that there was something fundamentally wrong with me. And so the more that I worked on myself in this fast, furious, committed way, the more I was sort of secretly, silently feeding and fueling the underlying message that I needed to be fixed. Now that carried me so far, but then there is a point where in my work, I kind of hit a wall. And I suddenly got really conscious of what I was doing. And I was like, holy shit, all this work I'm doing on myself, it's great. But on a certain level, it's still coming from this core sense of worthlessness. And this isn't serving me anymore. And so that was like a huge breakthrough for me. And so then I realized what my process was inviting me into was like a deeper level of surrender where it's like, okay, I think I'm now arriving at a time where it's time for me to do much less. And certainly the things I am doing, it's time for me to not do it in such a fast, furious way. And it's certainly time for me to cultivate consciousness around where this is coming from inside of me. Is this coming from a desire to return to myself, to return to the parts of myself that have made me feel so worthless and ashamed? Or is this coming from a desire to outrun myself? As you can imagine, that was a very powerful awareness for me. And it totally sort of shifted my unfolding process. Now, this is why I say, coming back to Rachel, like, I don't fucking care if she's doing something destructive in terms of the larger scope of her healing journey, because to me, it all serves. Like, that was my journey. That's been my journey. You know what I mean? It's not like I look back now and say to myself, oh man, you were a fraud and a fuck up and a failure for having destructive threads in your healing journey, until you came to that point of self-awareness. No, that was my journey. That's what I was capable of. That is what I was capable of at the time. And all the work I did on myself is what got me to that point of deepening awareness of, holy shit, there's something really subtle going on here that I now need to pay attention to in the next step of my journey. So it all serves. And this is what I'm saying. Like, I'm always talking about the soul journey in this lifetime. Guys, we are here to grow and evolve over the entire course of our lifetimes, if that's what you believe. Like, we are literally here to keep learning, changing, and evolving for the sake of our evolving spiritual consciousness over the course of many lifetimes. That's literally why we're here as human beings. We are here to be faced with these challenges that compel us to dig deep and to self-actualize and to continue to learn. If there were no more room for learning in our lifetimes, there is no point to being alive. We might as well be dead. I mean, I'm being a little dramatic, but you get the gist, right? There's not an endpoint to all of this. It just keeps deepening and deepening and deepening if you choose to go that. So for me, coming back to Rachel, it's like, yeah, maybe she is doing something destructive with this lawsuit. Again, I don't understand the lawsuit, but maybe she is doing something destructive with the lawsuit. Maybe the podcast isn't the best thing for her, but guess what? She's on her journey. She's doing what she knows how to do right now. And as she continues to work on herself, she's going to get even more clarity on her blind spots. And maybe she will reach a point where she says, oh, you know what? I don't think this podcast is really helping me anymore. I think it's fueling, a deeper desire for external approval and attention. Now I'm going to walk away from the podcast. And then maybe she's going to give up the podcast for 6 months or a year. And maybe she's going to go find deeper levels of self-love and self-acceptance. And then maybe from that place, she's like, oh, you know what? I'm ready to do another podcast. Only this time I'm going to do the podcast way differently. So it's just all just to say, you guys, it's like, it's an invitation to surrender the binary, especially when it comes to the healing journey. And this is why, I've talked about Lala. It's like, I believe in the genuine quality of her soft era. I think that is true for her. I think it is new for her to navigate a more modulated stance where she is open to the idea of seeing the humanity of someone like Tom Sandoval, who normally her impulse would be to just completely, not just write him off, but to like bully him off the show or something, right? And I also see how she then co-opted that soft era in order to have this judgmental demand on Ariana. Again, for me, it's not one or the other. It's not, oh, she's completely healed and healing and, the absolute model of wholeness and integration, nor is it, oh, she's full of shit and clearly everything she's been doing on herself is bullshit. No, these people are human beings who are on their journeys. And this is often the richness of life. The very thing that heals us, feeds us, and fuels us can also be used to hold us back. Conversely, some of our most destructive aspects can also fuel our impulses towards wholeness and healing. It's not one or the other. So for me, coming back to Jax and all of this, just to kind of like really distill this down to the basic point, do I think that he's done something that's really real and productive? Yes. And do I think this is just the beginning of a much, much, much deeper journey for him? Abso-fucking-lutely. And do I think Jax is still going to very much be Jax for a while? Abso-fucking-lutely. Especially a guy like Jax. And now this is what's so interesting. And I'm going to kind of get a little bit more into the Jax of it all right now. I did listen, as I said, to his episode about this on When Reality Hits with Jax and Brittany. And, it's interesting. It all felt there. I was really of two minds about it. I mean, he's such an interesting guy because I think Jax is actually very clever. I know he's kind of got a reputation. Let's say this. He's got a reputation for not necessarily being like the most book smart kind of guy. But Jax, there's an awareness to Jax, and there's kind of an emotional sharpness and an emotional acuity to him. And I think he's a lot more self-aware than people often give him credit for. It's interesting because we'll go a little bit into the Valley. Now, so many people have been like, oh, you're going to talk about the Valley. We'll go a little bit into the Valley now. I remember, so when the whole conflict with Kristen kicked off at the beginning of the season, I forget the details now, but it had something to do with the fact that Kristen was bringing in something that Jax had sort of done or said, I think during their first lunch. And that's the moment where Brittany then cut in and was basically like, well, why don't we talk about like the thing that you were saying about Michelle being racist or something to that effect. And that's where that whole conflict kicked off that then kind of tracked throughout the entire season. And I remember kind of like intuitively dropping into that a little bit. I was like, what was going on for Brittany there? Because it was so... Brittany's another one. She's a sharp little sniper from the side. Anyone who's listened to me for a while knows I've kind of like had Brittany's number from the beginning. She's always felt so crafty to me. Like she just knows what she's doing and she knows how to get what she wants. She reminds me, this is totally a digression, but Brittany reminds me of like a kid. like a 5-year-old girl who knows how to get what she wants. Like you can't see me at home. I literally, without even realizing it, my hands are starting to, you know how like cartoon villains will kind of rub their hands together? Like, that's what my hands are doing now is Brittany. It's like she's this sort of like mischievous, sneaky little kid who sort of knows she's like the cute little girl. And if I sort of smile really big, like I'm going to get what I want. And I know how to make it look and sound so innocent. But I'm a little girl who sort of knows exactly what to do or say to get everything that I fucking want. And kind of like a little kid, when her tricks don't work and she doesn't get what she wants, then she's going to throw a tantrum. And we've seen her throw some of those entitled tantrums, particularly on Vanderpump Rules, when she doesn't get her way. Like, it's always been so interesting how quickly Brittany shifts from, I'm just, golly old me, I'm just nice little Brittany, Southern hospitality, how quickly that can shift to a really entitled, again, it almost feels like a childlike temper tantrum to me. So this is all just to say, I always feel like Brittany on a certain level knows exactly what she's doing. And so, I really noticed that Kristen was bringing in something Jax was doing or saying, and that's when Brittany came in with her little kind of like, well, let's talk about you, Kristen. And so when I was intuitively feeling around like what was going on for Brittany there, what did immediately come up for me was, oh, I'm protecting Jax. And when I followed that thread, just intuitively what came up for me, what it really felt like to me, if like I had to sort of bet my life one way or the other, was like, Jax is someone who was the villain on Vanderpump Rules for a long time and got a lot of grief for it and was majorly disliked for it. And then he was like fired from the show, right? Which was like a huge bruise to his ego. And I could kind of just feel the possibility of this place where it's like, okay, he's got a job back. He's back on reality TV. And this place in Jax, it's like, I'm going to show the world I'm different. I'm going to show the world I'm not that same guy. Like, I'm going to show the world, like, I've got something to prove to the world. I'm a husband now. I'm a father now. I'm not that same guy that I used to be. Like, this is the way it's going to play out. And the voice felt so camera conscious to me. And it felt to me like, if I'm right about this, as Brittany is like, I know Jax really cares about how he's coming off this season. And I know he's got an agenda of like the face he wants to present to the world for the sake of the camera. Kristen is jeopardizing that right now. Now, part of what comes up for me as Brittany, and I think this sort of plays into the dynamic of their relationship, is like, it's almost sort of like there's going to be hell to pay for me, for Cruz, for the household if Jax gets pissed off. Actually, what's coming to me too is like, he might blame me for this. You know what I mean? It's like, well, why didn't you do anything? Why didn't you say anything? It's almost like I'm going to be the one who bears the brunt of Jax's anger if Kristen starts sort of putting him on blast for being up to his old tricks. So as Brittany, I'm kind of coming in to protect him, to protect myself, to protect Cruz, to protect the household. And I'm sort of throwing a little smoke bomb. Now, that was kind of my initial hit on it. And what's interesting is like, I felt like that was kind of confirmed by the season finale because, and this was what was so empowering about what Brittany was doing in that last episode, where she started calling Jax out about the discrepancy between what he does and says on camera and what he does and says off camera. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, this feels like it's totally confirming what I was feeling for him, which is Jax is fucking aware of the camera and how he comes off. And I just, it feels important to say that because I feel like, again, Jax is so fucking tricky. Maybe this is, part of what he and Brittany have in common. They're both very tricky. He's so fucking tricky because it's like part of what we quote unquote love about him is there's a way in which it seems like he doesn't care about the cameras. Like I said, he was so willing to throw it all out there. But even that, it's sort of like, oh God, you guys, this is getting into such a digression, but this is about Jax. It's like his willingness to be the villain on the show, Vanderpump Rules, and to create all kinds of fucking chaos. It's like, even that, I feel like there's, again, right? I'm talking about that there's wisdom in everything. There's a method to that madness. I mean, one, I'm aware I'm creating a great show. You know what I mean? So there's a hit I get off of that. Like, this is going to fuel my fame. This is going to fuel my success. This is going to fuel my stardom. I'm going to, on a certain level, be loved by my fellow cast members because I'm creating a great show. I'm going to be loved by the producers. I'm going to be loved by Lisa Vanderpump. There's a mileage I get out of being the villain. There's a mileage I get out of being the buffoon on the show, right? Oh, God, there's so much more I could say about Jax's relationship to being the villain. I'm going to pause there because I feel like it's going to get too digressive. But I guess what I'm saying is that even in the way that Jax has been willing to be this villain with like egg on his face, even that, it feels like there's a certain kind of, even if it's semi-conscious awareness of what he's doing. And then there's also a push-pull, right? Because it's like he gets mileage out of it. He gets attention from it. He gets success out of it. But then he also resents it because people don't like him. And he's sort of held responsible for his actions. And it's almost sort of like, as Jax, I just sort of hear this voice. It's like, what the fuck? Like, I'm doing what you want me to do. I'm tap dancing. I'm doing my song and dance. It's going to make this show a hit for everyone, which benefits everyone. And now you guys are like coming down on me. And so then it's like he resents being cast as the villain. He resents being the scapegoat. And then that fuels the part of him that then wants to turn over this new leaf and be seen in a different light. But there's like a through line here where Jax is kind of always aware of perception and what's going on. And again, I'm just saying all this because I think it's a really important distinction to make, because I think it's very easy to believe that he's not aware. So the reason why I'm saying this is that Jax is fucking tricky. So when he's on his podcast and he's saying things like, I know I'm at the start of this journey. I know I've got a long way to go. I know change isn't going to happen overnight. He even started saying like, I want to say I'm a work in progress, but I know that I can't say I'm a work in progress because I've always been saying I'm a work in progress. Again, there's that self-awareness, and he's saying things that sound so fucking good. And as Jamie, I even have these moments of like, oh, it's amazing that he's saying this. It's demonstrating certain self-awareness. And then it's like, but wait a second, this is the trouble with Jax. And this is what Jax, I don't envy Jax. He's got a real road ahead of him. He's got to surround himself with people who really can be attuned to his bullshit. Because kind of like I explored this in a previous episode, much like Lala's ego and bluster can co-opt her soft era as a tool for her ego and bluster, it's like Jax's ego and manipulative streak can so quickly swoop in and co-opt whatever humility and actual growth is there for his ego and his driving force of will. And that's what makes this really tricky. So listening to this episode, I just found I'm laughing right now because it's like, again, I just sort of feel the mischief maker in Jax. It's, oh God. And as I say that, my foot now is starting to really fast and furiously tap against the floor. So I guess here's some of sort of the manic life force energy in Jax. It's just, he's a tricky guy. And he's got a lot to sort through. And he's going to need a really deep level of support and help to really dismantle where this is all coming from inside of him. But I would say to Jax, like if I could say anything to Jax, and then again, I'm also saying this to the audience at large, it's like, if he can just surrender any sort of timeline for this journey and understand, okay, if he's 45 now, this is a lifelong road he's going on. And just to really put down any kind of sense of like, there's a destination to get to. There's an endpoint to this. There's a point where I suddenly prove myself to the world that I'm different and changed. Oh God, it breaks my heart because I lived that way too for so long. Like I just wanted to prove to everyone I was different. Spoiler alert, that moment never comes. Because again, it's like when you're in that mindset of like, I'm just going to show everyone I'm different, you are seeking out that external validation and you're in resistance to yourself. You are showing no kindness and compassion to all the different aspects of you. So were there times in my life where I was behaving in ways that didn't feel true to my authentic self, where I felt like I betrayed myself, and where people did judge me because of how I was behaving? Abso-fucking-lutely. But the answer and the true growth and change never came from me resisting those parts of myself, aka showing the world I was different. The true growth and change always came from, again, this is why I talk about the wisdom in everything, understanding where those parts of me came from. Why was I betraying myself? What was the deeper need I was trying to fulfill in me? What part of me was acting out? Where was that coming from inside of me? And what did I truly need to be seen and heard there? And once I could start getting clear on those things, that's when I cultivated so much compassion for the younger self who acted in ways that didn't feel true to who I actually was. That's where I could have actual compassion and understanding for what I was going through at that time that led me to act in a certain way. And it's like, once I had that forgiveness and understanding, it's like, oh my God, I just feel for that kid. It's like, I have no more shame about it. It just is what it is. And now if I run into people who knew me at a certain time, there's nothing in me that feels like I've got to prove I'm different, because I'm not different. I've just returned to a deeper truth of who I am. And when I show up in these like interactions with people who maybe knew me way back when, there is nothing to prove. I'm just going to be me. And I just am who I am, and they either like me or they don't. So anyways, again, a little bit of a digression, but the point that I'm trying to make is I would really want to invite Jax to just surrender all notion of like, okay, there's going to be this point where I arrive at where I'm different and people see I'm different, and then I'm finally proving myself. It's just like, let that all go. Let that all go. Let that all go. That would just sort of be step one. It's interesting. Something is coming through me right now very intuitively and empathically for Jax. It's like when I sort of talked about this notion of Jax being willing to really let this all go, to let the timeline go. I don't know. I just suddenly got this vision of like a really undefended Jax. I got this image of a very vulnerable Jax, and it's quite striking because obviously, he's a big guy in stature, and he's got those muscles, and he's tall. He's like this big masculine guy, right? And I just suddenly got this image of him like so softened, so surrendered, so unguarded. In this image, it's like he's literally crying tears. It's almost like I sort of see the regular Jax as just having all this like figurative and maybe even literal energetic armor, that sort of guards and protects his heart. Like that's part of his like musculature. Like he sort of has like created this flesh armor around him. And it's almost just like all of that armor has just softened. And like I said, there's something that feels so young here. It feels to me like this 3 or 4-year-old little boy. And it's the place where it's like he can just be, like, without having to prove anything, without having to be anything or anyone else other than who he is. This place where he can just be. And what comes to me, and maybe this is stating the obvious, but I'm feeling it so deeply in my body for him. It's just this sense for Jax. It's like, it's not enough. Like that's how he's felt. Like me just being me is not enough. If I'm not presenting a certain way, proving myself in a certain way, doing something, being something else, it is fundamentally not enough. And if I were to just be, I feel like a scream that wants to come through my heart. So maybe this is a big source of a lot of like that disowned rage and aggression, just this kid who just wants to feel like he can simply be without essentially having to justify his existence in some way. And it's hard because like when I feel into this surrendered aspect of Jax, this is where I do feel his heart. And that's kind of always what I've loved about Jax. I mean, to be honest, it's what I think makes Vanderpump Rules an interesting show. I think everyone on that cast, they're all so destructive in different ways. But I think what makes the show so fascinating is that fundamentally, I think they all want to love and to be loved. I've always said, for me, the unofficial subtitle of the show is Twisted Heart. Like, I just feel all these twisted hearts, like these people who really want to love and be loved, but they just get in their own fucking way, which, you know, also feels very reflective of Lisa Vanderpump, who I do feel has so much love that can move through her, that we see move towards like her family, her kids, the animals. But there's so much cruelty interlaced with her love, and her love is so conditional. Like, it's like the love and the cruelty have gotten so deeply intertwined. Twisted heart, twisted heart, twisted heart. But, you know, coming back to Jax, I, you know, and I know others might disagree, but I have felt that there's something loving in him. And, you know, as we talk about in the episode that I'm going to re-release, there's something also, I think, really simple about him. And that's part of like his potential beauty, is that like, this is actually a guy who's not meant to be very complicated. It's sort of like, I don't know, I'm hearing the words like direct, simple transmission of energy. It's just like there's just energy that wants to move through him, and there's love that wants to flow through him. And it's very simple, and it's very direct, and it's very uncomplicated. And I can just kind of feel this place in him where it just doesn't feel like it's enough. Okay, so where did all this come from? Oh, yeah. So I think he needs, what I would want to invite Jax to do is to really surrender the timeline and see where that takes him. I think the other thing that Jax really, really needs, and I think we talk about this in the episode that we recorded, but I was really just feeling it listening to this conversation with his life coach, which I want to say, like, the life coach actually, you know, I always go into conversations like this very skeptical, but the life coach kind of won me over. Like, he's clearly done a lot of work on himself, and he had a really interesting viewpoint, like a smart guy. But my big but here, though, I was just like, you know, all of this is wonderful, great, and fantastic. And yeah, like, you're getting Jax to think about sort of interesting things about like, what does Jax want to create for himself? And, you know, whatever, I'll let you listen to the episode. But what's missing in all of this, I could just feel the whole time, was just like Jax has to have space for his rage somewhere. Like, he just like, oh my God, as soon as I said that, my foot started tapping again. He needs space to let his rage flow uncensored, uncompromised. Because again, for all of us, there is wisdom in our feelings and in our emotions, and something wants to be heard there. You know, there's something that Jax is furious about. And as a guy who, it feels like to me, has a very strong life force energy, does have a relationship to aggressive energy that, and I want to say, when I say aggressive, because I feel like that word is so pathologized, I'm not saying that as a bad thing. Like, I have aggressive energy. That's part of the energy that moves through this podcast. And aggressive energy can move through our hearts, heart-based aggression. I mean, and maybe there's a different word for it that's might be more appropriate, but like strong, powerful, assertive, that's a good word, assertive energy. Jax has got that in spades. And when that is aligned with the heart, and when that's aligned towards the highest good, that is fucking powerful energy, and it's needed and wanted in this world. Men have it, women have it, we all can have it. Jax has it. And so it's hard, because if he's like, his anger is co-opting that energy. And so my fear for Jax is, if he's at odds with his anger for his entire life, he's never going to get access to the higher self version of that loving, assertive, powerful life force energy. That's why with my clients, I'm always supporting my clients to go into the depths of their rage with consciousness, so they can find out what it actually has to say. So it's not running the show unconsciously anymore. And then they have access to all this powerful life force energy and to use it constructively. Jax, he's got to have space for that. So, you know, I mean, I don't know, this life coach, as we all saw, it's the life coach from the Valley that Jesse Lally was using. I know he's a big proponent of the use of healing psychedelics and the healing journey. It's possible, if Jax did venture into the world of plant medicine, that could be a space where he processes anger and rage for sure. If he's not going to do plant medicine, at some point, Jax needs to find. If I were working with Jax, number one thing I would do is support him to both be in a conscious relationship with his rage so that he could then get to this very deep, tender vulnerability. This little boy that I feel in him who just wants to be worthy through his simple act of being. All right, you guys, I said a lot. I hope this was interesting. This episode just feels a little different to me. Maybe a little bit more conceptual, more philosophical. I know I've kind of touched on things that I've already explored, but sometimes it feels good to come back around and to really take a deeper look at what's going on. I think in conclusion, big picture level, like I said, very heartened by Jax's diagnosis. Also very aware this is literally just the first step in a much bigger journey. Also very aware Jax is a very tricky guy who's going to need deeply attuned and sensitive help. And I just, I'm rooting for him though. Like, I hope that he's willing to go the distance with this. I hope that he's in this for the long haul. I do think there are very worthy, valuable, dynamic aspects of Jax that really could be used for the sake of his highest good and the highest good of those in his life. And like I said, bigger picture, I just feel something here about both watching the breakdown of reality TV and also watching these people reclaim their humanity. And I guess my invitation to anyone listening to this is, if you do find yourself wanting some of these people like a Jax or a Lala or a Carl Radke or Rachel to be healed, fixed, and integrated overnight, where is that coming from in you? What might it mean to surrender that demand? But then even more importantly, do you have that demand on yourself? You know, do you have that demand on yourself? And this is actually the last thing I'll say about this. This is important. As you guys know, this is a space where we're really consciously holding space for the complexity of people's humanity. And as I said, you know, it's very possible to be on a healing journey and to still have major blind spots and to act destructively. Now, just because we hold space for someone's humanity and we acknowledge the actual real steps they're taking on their healing journey, that also doesn't mean that we have to tolerate bad behavior. And this feels especially important, you know, with someone like Jax, whose behavior can be really problematic, especially towards Brittany at times. I mean, it's there's problematic behavior. And so I guess, yeah, it does feel important to say this, that yes, I support Jax in this healing journey. Yes, I hold space for these aspects of him that feel really great. And that does not excuse ways in which he or anyone acts out. And you know, just even taking this off Jax, for anyone in our lives, regardless of the work they're doing on themselves, if they are still behaving in destructive ways, we are still allowed to have our boundaries. And it doesn't mean that we have to jeopardize ourselves or our well-being for the sake of like being there for someone who maybe, like I said, is still not behaving in a net, total, healthy, constructive way that's good for us. And like I'm always saying, part of the nuance of this journey in this lifetime is, yeah, we cultivate understanding and compassion for ourselves in the place where we have made unconscious choices that are perhaps not in our best interest or in the best interest of others. And we also take responsibility for the things that we have done that sometimes can be destructive to ourselves and others. And like I'm always saying, you do the crime, you do the time. You know, I always go back to Jen Shah. I just did a whole Real Housewives of Salt Lake City rewatch. Jen Shah, for whatever reason, there's something to this day that I always feel her vulnerability. I always feel her fear. I always feel aspects of her loving heart. I always see and experience her charm and her humor. Like, there are things I really appreciate about Jen Shah. But that said, I have no qualm, to say the least, about her being in jail. Like, she committed crimes. She did things that were so fucking destructive. She victimized people. Like, that's real. That is real. And so, yes, go to jail. Yes, pay millions of dollars in restitution. 100%. No, you're not someone I'm inviting over to Thanksgiving dinner. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, you're not someone I'm welcoming into my life. No, or even just her crimes aside, just Jen Shah, even before she got arrested. No, I'm not going to tolerate you yelling and screaming at me. No, I'm not going to be close to you if you're going to treat me this way. I can hold space for your humanity. I have compassion for where this is coming from inside you. Part of me has compassion for this woman who made these terrible, terrible choices and is now paying a price. And I can also have very clear boundaries that says, hey, loving you from afar. So yes, I just wanted to bring that in, that we can both hold space for someone's humanity, for their vulnerability. We can both acknowledge them for the healthy choices that they're making. And we can also still hold them responsible for the destructive choices they're making. And we can still have our boundaries, and we can still call out things that are destructive and problematic. We can do this all at the same fucking time, which hopefully is what we're doing on this podcast. All right, you guys, I've said a lot for now. This felt like a little bit of a different episode. It felt a little bit more extemporaneous, a little bit more freeform, kind of letting myself go wherever my mind and intuition wanted it to go. I hope you liked it. Hope you got something out of it. Like I said, I am now going to leave you with this episode that I released about a year and a half ago called What Would It Take for Jax Taylor to Heal? And maybe it'll be interesting to hear for the first time or to listen to for the first time in a long while in context of everything we've discussed today and in context of all the developing news. As always, let me know if you have thoughts, insights, questions, concerns. Follow me on Instagram, Jamie Stein, JAMIESTEIN, for exclusive content. And if you are interested in parsing out some of your own threads and accessing your deeper life force flow and your deeper vulnerability for the sake of bringing your awesome creative life force to the world in a constructive way, head over to my website, send me an email, let me know, and we can go from there. All right, you guys, see you on the flip side. I just always get so curious about what it would take for someone like Jax Taylor to truly heal and whether that's something that's actually possible. Jax, to me, yes, he's someone who does like a lot of really problematic, cruel, and hurtful things to people. But even beyond that, it's like what I notice about him is that he doesn't fully seem tapped into reality. Like, it really feels like there are certain synapses missing where he truly doesn't take in the information that's coming to him. So like an example that comes to me is just how he, at the beginning of the season, and even still at the reunion, he was getting so angry at Tom for not reaching out to him and not being there for him with regards to the wedding plans. But then literally there's footage in the show of Tom Sandoval pointing to his cell phone and saying, no, Jax, look, I texted you, like I was there for you. And then Jax sits there and says, oh, well, I don't know that I got it. And then Tom says, no, look, you responded right here. And then it's like there's a flicker of a moment maybe where Jax takes it in, but you kind of see there's like a way that it doesn't fully process. And then I just think like on an even bigger level, it just seems like he can't grasp that there are things that he does that really has a destructive impact on people. You know, like for example, texting the rage text, disinviting people from the party, you know, being this sort of difficult, bratty guy. And then when people have a response to his behavior, he gets so, it's like there's no connection in his mind between his own behavior and his own destructive actions and then what then comes back towards him. And then he's so quick to point the finger at other people and tell them like, you're a bad person, with no seeming awareness of his own part or responsibility or culpability in these situations. So in the place where it like feels to me like there's really something almost like cognitively missing in him, how does someone like this heal? And is it even possible? Or has something kind of like gotten split or broken in him that maybe is beyond repair?
Yeah, it's a good question because really what brings people to an awareness that they need healing? Was somebody like him in particular who, if he's always pointing the finger outside himself, it's kind of clear at this point that he really only cares about himself. He displays pretty deep narcissistic tendencies, in my opinion, and I'm no expert on that, but there's like an idea that whatever somebody is trying to bring to him in relationship is, from his opinion, completely distorted, right? So whatever somebody else is saying, he is defending himself completely and not actually interested in what the person is saying about him. He's kind of, in my opinion, what I see is that he feels deeply misunderstood.
Right.
That there's whatever behaviors, whatever things that he does, it's not the way it seems. It's not the way it looks.
I mean, I completely agree with you about this feeling inside of him where he feels misunderstood. And my sense of him always is kind of like that there's this place where he got sort of really deeply hurt or wronged that on some level he felt was never really answered for. And so it's almost like now there's this voice in him kind of saying like, well, they didn't have to answer for what they did. Why the hell should I have to answer for what I do? Like it's not fucking fair, basically, is what I hear from him. In order for him to heal, he would have to be willing to take ownership of the place inside that is all about himself and getting what's his, right? Because that place stems from a place where he got wounded, where something in him was sort of missed or wrongfully taken. And when I feel into that for him, like if Jax really were to go into a space where he went all the way into like, yeah, these are the bad things I do and I don't care, that it would then take him into this deep place of powerlessness and vulnerability where like he could get hurt again, where he could get misunderstood again.
Exactly. And I think that's how you see this type of personality develop. I often look at him and imagine him being 5 or 7 or 8, sometimes 12, depending on what he's talking about. But, when you really look at him from that younger place, it makes more sense. It's like he may be close to 40, but emotionally, I think his development stunted a really long time ago. And it's a very deeply painful thing to witness and to watch.
And it really does feel like when I feel into it, it just feels like his experience of powerlessness. It feels very, very intolerable. And it feels very young. And it feels very connected to his heart, actually.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The trick with him is because it's so young, whatever happened there for him, he's, I don't find him that charming, but apparently, a lot of people do. And I think that there's something there that he's learned how to really pretend. There's a mimicking that happens. If he gets information that says, oh, this is what you would say if you were somebody that was sorry. And then he says all the words. I've heard him say things before, like, oh yeah, what I did was really wrong. But then he'll turn around and completely smash that idea. And that is going to require, I guess, somebody to, in terms of support, be able to really see his bullshit.
And I have to imagine, if I were working with someone like him, I mean, I have to imagine you'd have to slow things down so much because there is this processing piece where it just feels like he literally doesn't take in information. Like his blinders are on And I'm just hearing the words like, I won't hear it. I won't see it. Nope, 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 nope. Like he's just like got his nose pointed to the ground. Blinders are on, full steam ahead. Like I won't hear it. I won't see it. I won't know it. And it's like, I think you'd have to slow things down so much just to even get him to like take in information and to even like help him start to feel how the information lands inside of himself.
Yes. And there's going to be layers of deep, like you mentioned rage, right? That's the first thing I think you would meet along the way when you start to slow things down.
Like the process of slowing things down would actually help him to access the full depth of his violence and rage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And it would need to be held and contained and supported because there's obviously some whatever happened for him. I don't think he really got held in that. I think about it kind of also brain chemistry wise. Like I don't know if he's on medication, but I have a sense that it would help him slow things down a little bit. This is the trick with people like them. That part of themselves that is very hyper or, charged and passionate and, moving out there, like that's where they get shit done. There's something about that they are so afraid to lose. And maybe this is the time for him to do it because naturally in his, age, there's a way that he doesn't have to keep up with his 20s and 30s anymore. He's married, maybe there's something about this time in his life that would actually invite a desire to just relax into himself a little bit. But I don't think he's ever really known how to do that. And I think he's terrified that if he lets go of any of this unprocessed aggression, it's an aggression that he uses also to do whatever he does. What job do you think he should be doing? If you thought about, if you tapped into him, what do you think he would be good with?
Honestly, what came to me was like construction, like working with his hands, physical, like not in the head. It's embodied. Mm-hmm. He gets to channel his energy into something. And there's also something for me around like every day he sees his progress. You know what I mean? It's like every day he sees like the fruits of his creation. Cause Jax is not a long game kind of guy, And it is almost like it's like a young kid who's developing, like, oh, you got to give them little things to do so that they can actually accomplish it and feel good about themselves. I think something like construction or something like that you can really see the daily progress and really sort of work with your hands, be embodied. I think that would really be good for him.
So I like the idea of it being inanimate in the beginning because my thought was like trainer, somebody who helps other people get fit or in their bodies more and sees progress. I agree. I like that idea, but I could see where it would be more about him.
Yeah.
In the context of training people than it would be about them. So I like this idea of having it be something constructive that doesn't involve other people necessarily.
Yeah, and then also where he has like a clearly defined role. I think there's just something like if he were a trainer, right, he's still kind of like the boss. And there's a whole thing of like, I'm the number one guy. Like there's something that feels healing for him about having like a designated specific role in a hierarchy. And it's like, yeah, they're coworkers who are part of a team, but like no one, I mean, this is my imagination of the job. I don't actually know how construction sites work, but like no one's like breathing down his neck. You know what I mean? Or like no one, like he's just got his job to do and his part to do and he can be good at it, but he's still a part of a team, but he's not the number one guy, but he can channel his energy. I don't know. That to me feels very like a good path for him while he's going and getting his therapeutic help.
Put him on a chain gang.
Well, something like that. Well, I think, did Jax say something like that? Am I totally making this up that he once said he would kind of like to go to prison?
I have no idea. I could see the part of him that knows that there is no way he can do this on his own.
Well, it's just so interesting because if he did say that, that is the flavor of what I was picking up on with the construction thing. It's like you have a role, there's a system, you show up, you know what you do, like you channel your energy into something embodied. Like, oh, this is so funny because I've thought about this for him before. When I've kind of dropped into, sometimes I drop into people's higher selves, and I always see him as kind of like a great, like Roman soldier. And it's that flavor though of like, no, he's not the general. Like he's a soldier. Like he's one of many, because the thing about Jax is like, yeah, he's got this passion. Like, he'll fight for a cause, and he'll be dutiful, and he's got that aggression as you're talking about. So he's like a perfect soldier, but you don't want him in charge. Like you want to direct the energy. You don't want him making choices about where the energy goes. And I think some part of him kind of knows that. Like I think he's sort of meant to follow. But I think the problem is in the world that he's in the world we live in, there's very few people. I don't know. There's just not like a structure or an institution right now that can really contain or direct his energy. And I also think that's part of what's going to make it so hard for him to get help is like, where can this man go where people are not going to be scared of his rage and are going to be willing to like hold space for like the true depth of violence of it? It's like that's.
Oh God, I just had a very horrible image about Kentucky. Like you said, where is he going to go? And I just imagine him heading to Kentucky with Brittany and then being a good old boy in the South and going, no, that's not a good idea for Jax at all.
You mean, and that's where his energy ends up going?
When you say fight for a cause or, like be co-opted for something, I could imagine him easily, being kicked off by
like white supremacists.
White supremacy, yes, exactly. I have to say it. Like he's made for that.
Well, because he's got that vibe. Like we've seen it on the show. He definitely finds people to blame, and then he wants to annihilate them. I mean, it really feels that way. Like he wants to kill them. Like he wanted to kill James Kennedy. It felt like this season he wanted to kill Tom Stanton. Like you sometimes get that feeling with him. Like if he could get away with it, he would kill people.
Exactly.
And yeah, and that's the part too that I'm speaking of where it's like, where does a guy like this go to get help? But there's so few healers or whatever people out there, who are going to be willing to hold space for that level of rage. And if Jax doesn't have a space where someone can hold space for that, he isn't going to return to wholeness.
Yeah, I think it would need to be somebody deeply conscious also, because, there's a strong kind of masculine aggression that is so needed and could be used for something so constructive, like you said.
As we talk, it's like I do get this sense of like, oh, Jax, from a destiny perspective or like a karma perspective, like it does really sort of feel like he came into this life with this sort of like aggressive, charged energy that could be directed towards the greater good. And like that there is this space that he inhabits or is sort of meant to inhabit as like a follower. Like it almost feels like, he was not meant to necessarily be the brightest bulb. You know what I mean? That he really was meant to be like this dutiful soldier. And it's sort of like his life task is around like, where are you going to go with this energy? Like, are you going to fall in line or are you just going to be like this destructive force of rage?
Well, he would definitely have to be taken to his knees.
Yeah.
There's a few things that really tried, even through the show anyway, to help him see something. And, the whole shoplifting thing, when his dad died, there's just a few things there that had the potential to actually bring him down, and he managed to not really take a knee. And I think if I see anything in terms of what he would need to engage in a real process around healing a split, he would have to find some humility and be humbled.
And that's the danger with all these people being on the show. It's like as long as they're on the show, there's something that keeps them from being fully humbled because they're rich and famous and have notoriety.
Oh God, Jamie, maybe we're responsible for his split. We're watching this shit. We're we're a part of this.
We are a part of it. I mean, I don't disagree with that. We are a part of it. But the good news is one day the show will be over. And, I mean, we'll see, because like we did see how extremely he kind of contracted after the wedding. So, you know, if the show ends or if he gets fired and that restlessness really takes hold of him and he starts really driving his life into the ground, maybe that will be the point, you know, where he finally becomes willing. But then he has to find someone who can actually hold space for him. So, you know, in some ways I feel compassion for him because it's like he has his work cut out for him.
Totally.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I saw that at the end of this season. It was a little sad. I think he really started looking around and saying, I am like, this part of my life should be over. I should not be bartending right now. Like I should be something else. I wanted something else for myself. And I think where you said at the top of the call, you know, his lack of being able to be in reality, I don't think he sees himself very clearly. What he does when he sees that picture of him participating in something that he hates, you know, he's looking at all the younger crew coming in and he's like, I'm not you, but here I am standing here doing the same thing as you. He doesn't see who he is there. He thinks that he's the star of the show, or he thinks that he's the reason that they're there, instead of, wait, maybe my time
is up.
I think he realizes his time should be over, like he should be moving on to something else. I just don't think he really knows where to go.
The one thing I'll say that I'm still so drawn to with him is like the role his father plays in all of this. Like the way that he deifies his dead father and now demonizes his mother. And then when I was feeling into like this place where he got hurt that just felt so powerless, I just sort of felt the presence of his father, and I was just trying to feel into like, what am I feeling here? I don't know that I get the sense that it was his father who hurt him, but something about his father not taking a stand for him or somehow being like a passive witness. But there's something that Jax doesn't want to see when it comes to his father.
Yeah. Yeah, and when I think about that, I think he saw where his father was powerless to his mother somewhere. Like, I feel like mom held a lot of power in the family dynamic. And like you said, dad did not kind of stand up for Jax, but probably gave Jax a lot of, one-on-one time. Like, this is what you got to do with the women. Make the woman happy and you'll be okay. But it's like never really empowered. I don't think he maybe was empowered in his relationships in some way, and then kind of passed that along to Jax. And Jax that might have been where he made some sort of young decision. I will never be in a relationship like that. I will never be controlled by a woman.
And then the woman kind of becomes the demon, and the man kind of the mother became the demon, and the father became like the hero who was always there for him.
Yeah, the demon and the obsession, right? Whatever he didn't get from his mom, that kind of, I have a feeling she didn't really give him a sense that he was, like, he's deeply insecure. There wasn't like a strong, nurturing vibe there.
And then it's almost something like if he lets himself know some of his issues with his father, it's almost like then he just feels so alone and like there's no one to count on. Which brings kind of him back to the powerlessness. And then like, if I kind of feel into that, it's sort of the place of like, why doesn't anyone love me? Like the young place of like, yeah, there's no one here for me. No one loves me. I'm all alone in this.
Definitely some sort of betrayal. Definitely there's some way that he was either triangulated or deeply hurt by somebody that he counted on for something at a young age.
Let's say Jack sort of developmentally stopped at this young age, and that's why we're seeing a lot of what we're seeing. What causes one person to get so developmentally stopped at an age of wounding, whereas other people can kind of continue to emotionally mature beyond the age of like deep wounding?
Depends on a lot of things. There's so many factors around, like where he was developmentally at the time. If you felt into his attachment style, what would you say that is?
I mean, I think it's interesting from the point of view, like in the place where I sort of like on a more psychic or intuitive level, kind of feel him as someone who sort of came into this lifetime as someone who's kind of meant to follow and to channel his energy in that way. Like in a way, it kind of makes sense to me. It's like there's something almost simple about him, like intellectually, you know what I mean? Or simple about him emotionally. Which actually also feeds in, because I do think there are times where Jax is the unlikely voice of reason. Like I do think there are times where he really sees things and he is actually able to call a spade in his own Jax way. And I think it's part of that simpleness. Like there's a way that he kind of just sees through stuff. But I could also see that very simpleness contributing to like, kind of like, okay, like I'm not going to kind of mature much beyond this point in time.
Maybe what happened was he got dropped into some sort of disorganized space that did not hold that channel for him to really be in that simplified, oh, I do this task and I do it well, and then it's over. It feels like he's got something highly disorganized around him, and maybe his environment somehow participated in that. Maybe it was a disorganized environment, and
right.
If he came predisposed with simplicity, it didn't really nurture or somehow help him have that in a way, and then he became dysregulated.
Yes, that when you say that, I feel the truth. Like that makes so much sense to me, and it feels really true to me. And then where I go with that is, so like Jax sort of comes in with his essence, right? And then he's in this environment that's kind of dysregulated and doesn't support it, and so he doesn't like thrive in it completely. And then that gets turned against him, by mom. And dad's kind of there passive. And that's the place where Jack starts feeling misunderstood. And it's like
frustrated.
Yeah, like I was just about to say, the words I'm hearing is like, what the fuck is going on here? Like if you're Jax and you're this kind of simple, straightforward energy and you can see things and name things from that place of simplicity, and then there is this kind of like disorganized chaos around you, and then you're getting punished for it, I can really sort of hear that voice of like, what the fuck is going on here? And like, and you're letting her get away with this? Like, and then that's kind of where, it's where the template gets laid. And then you have this kid, this essence with all this sort of charged, aggressive energy. And where's that gonna go? You know what I mean? It turns into like the rage.
Oh yeah. And then that's where he would give up and lose his power, and then start looking outside of himself to others,
right,
to learn how to behave, because the way that he naturally would want to do that is not somehow mirrored back to him as good and right and okay. And so then it's like he has to be more than he is. And so he's constantly seeking out this reflection that says, oh, you're amazing. You're good looking, you're this, you're that.
It suddenly does feel to me like, oh, he's like a soldier looking for a cause.
Yeah.
That's like really what it feels like. And just so angry.
Sad.
Yeah, it is sad. And like so angry that there's no one kind of coming in and saying like, basically, okay, soldier, fall in line. This is what you do,
Don't you feel that? It's like, if I hear his voice, it's like, fucking somebody help me.
Well, and again, that's,
Tell me what to do.
I don't know if I'm making this up, but like, I just come back to this. Either he really said this or I'm inventing this, that part of him would want to go to prison. It makes so much sense in this context.
I can imagine him just basically saying, look, I'll do whatever. Just tell me what it is.
I feel like that's where you can feel his heart. Like, I feel his heart there. Like, I feel... Yeah, like the place where he wants to go to prison, that like unconscious place where he's saying, someone tell me what to do. It's like, that's where I feel his heart. And then I do feel even more compassion for him because I'm just like, oh my God, you are lost. Like, you aren't a leader. You're looking for someone to follow. You're looking to channel this energy. And there's just, you have no clue where to put it.
And I was thinking about Lisa Vanderpump's role here with him, because it kind of feels like he turned against her at some point, and I feel like maybe she was that person. You know how she loves to tell people, look, you just need to do this. And I think he was doing that, and I think she betrayed him somewhere down the road, or he felt betrayed by her somewhere down the road with all of his fuck ups, because she gave up on him. She was the general. She was the person that was saying, just put your head down, just do all this. He was doing it in the beginning, and then he just kept fucking up, and I think eventually she just kind of wrote him off. And I think that what I saw like this season, like whenever Jax, you just need to do, he'd be like, like, you can't tell me what to do, I'm going to do it my way.
Yeah, and I think also it's just like, she's also just such a problematic leader in the first place. It's just it's such a symptom of like, he doesn't know where to go, because Lisa Vanderpump is I mean, if you want to talk about narcissism, she is not someone who's fighting for the greater good. She's fighting for Lisa Vanderpump.
Exactly. And I think that, if you could have a superimposed hologram of maybe, another version of what his mom might have been, that could have been in there.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I feel like, we might just have to tackle Lisa Vanderpump at some point. I feel like we might have to open up that door.
Okay.